Welcome to the HERHealth podcast, transforming health for women and girls at risk, where we empower women and girls to take charge of their health and well-being. Join us as we shine a spotlight on issues affecting women and girls' health and explore ways to create positive change. Get ready to be inspired and empowered as we discuss health, advocacy, and empowerment for women and girls at risk. Please be advised that this podcast may cover sensitive topics such as gendered violence. We understand that these discussions can be difficult to listen to. If you feel uncomfortable or need support, we encourage you to prioritize your well-being. Consider exploring our other podcasts if these topics are triggering for you. Resources can be found in the description.
Welcome to the HERHealth podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Yursich. In today's episode, we're focusing on something both simple and powerful, the role of natural supports in prevention. While formal systems like healthcare and social services are essential, much of the support that sustains us every day comes from the people around us, like our family, our friends, our neighbors, and our communities. These natural supports can act as protective factors for mental health, helping us navigate stress, adversity, and life's challenges before they reach a crisis point. We're joined today by Brandi Bell, founder of Connections Consulting, who brings nearly 2 decades of experience in community development, wellness, and people-centered solutions. Through her work across the nonprofit sector, education, and government, Brandi has seen firsthand how meaningful relationships and strong communities can transform outcomes. In this conversation, we'll explore what natural supports really look like in practice, why they matter for prevention, and how each of us can play a role in strengthening the connections that help individuals and communities thrive. Brandi, I'm so grateful you're joining me today.
Hi.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'm sorry.
And to start off, I just wanted to ask you if you can share a little bit about your journey and what led you to focus on community and natural supports in your work.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. I oh, that's such a big question. I think honestly, as a kid, I grew up surrounded by, drugs, alcohol, and domestic violence as the oldest of 6 kids. I was always thinking of others before myself. I always say if I didn't have coaches and teachers in my life that I could go to, I wouldn't be here today. My parents were dealing with the chaos of poverty and addiction and trying to keep their heads above water. That it was outside people who really um, even gave me the notion that I could be more than I was. And so through that, it has been this long journey of always wanting to help people, through, community wellness, coaching. I still 20, I coach at the high school. I want to be the person that I needed when I was a kid. And through that, journey, finding out how to best get information and service communities and peoples the best I could. Nonprofit was really hard because you didn't have any money. I got into education, trying to make sure, people could go to school in their home communities, whether that would be northern, remote, or rural. Um, and when I felt like I was attending more funerals than graduations at the college, I really branched out into suicide prevention. And the government of Saskatchewan has a file in Indigenous and Northern Relations in La Ronge called the Embracing Life Initiative, which was about suicide prevention and community wellness, supporting communities. I jumped at that. I loved that role. I loved being able to work in community for 6 years. But the bureaucracy of that big civil servant machine um, didn't allow me to kind of branch out where I wanted to go and where communities really wanted people to see. And so I started Connections Consulting to dive in on work that I really cared about, where I could feel valued in community and where I felt like I could help.
That's so well said. And really quickly for our listeners, because not everyone is familiar, I think, with sort of the landscape. Can you tell us a little bit what it's like to live in La Ronge, Saskatchewan? Like what your community
Sure.
looks like, what the surroundings look like?
I would love to. I've been here since I was 24. I was a young married mom with two children. My husband's family is originally from here. They are Lac La Ronge Indian Band members. They are First Nations here in the community. I love it here. But there's no Starbucks or Tim Hortons. There's no street lights. I'm looking out the window and I'm looking at the lake. We live on a lake. The community is diverse. It is about 80% Indigenous, Métis, Cree, and Dene. It is northern. We have lots of snow still. Although it's only halfway up the province of Saskatchewan, it's still fairly remote, but it's one of the bigger communities in northern Saskatchewan. So very harsh winters. Our lake freezes over, so lots of ice fishing, but the lakes around us I think, are why people still are here. They sustain us in all of those spaces. So small community, lots of dual roles, and just neighbors always helping neighbors. That very kind of microcosm of family at the grassroots space of what community is meant to be.
That's so, I know you mentioned you came from Calgary. Does support and community look very different between the two?
Very different. And I think age, I'm now, I'm in my mid life range. In Calgary, I was quite young, as a teenager. And I think that, support looks different wherever you are, but that's the topic of today is everybody has support somewhere, even when we feel like we don't. But what could that look like and what is that? And so I think that's the essence of what natural supports really are.
That's so well put. And you raised that concept of natural supports. So the term natural supports can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yes.
So how do you define natural supports and what do those look like in everyday life?
I work really hard to not define it. Like, it's so funny because I fight with the academic in me all of the time. Because I think that, here's the thing. I had heard the term natural supports through Stops to Violence, and they were using it around, uh, primary kind of tools for intimate partner violence of who are you going to and who are you chatting with when you're struggling. I was saying regular people in my work, talking about we know when people around us aren't doing well. We know when people we love are struggling or who are having a hard time. And so when we first described it, it was like unpaid, informal relationships. And then it was like, hey, it's your family and friends, or who do you depend on and who depends on you? And so I've worked really hard because I didn't want to be specific with a definition around natural supports because who naturally supports you and what could that look like? And I mean from your cat or your dog or your canary to your grandmother, your coworkers, your favorite, Walmart co-op, TJ Maxx cashier, the barista, your hairdresser. It could be anyone in your life who you're comfortable with um, talking to.
That's Thank you for providing clarity around that because I like it. I too, that academic at heart, I'm like, but what do you mean you can't or won't define it? And then
I
the way
know.
you explained it, it really came across so well. We're like, there is no definition because it looks different for everyone. And it's where you draw those everyday natural and normal supports from where, because it definitely looks different for everybody.
And Sarah, it took us a while to get here. And I say that because when we took this back to community chatting about language is important. We wanted people who'd never heard the terms natural supports to be able to use it or I don't like it, I like it. What does that look like as kind of new terms or themes come about? But if we defined it as family and friends you're close with, what if somebody felt like they aren't close with their family? What if somebody had said, like, my friends don't get this. And then they're like, well, I guess I don't have any natural supports. Or if we define it as coworkers or informal supports, well, nobody supports me informally. I'm stuck all the time by myself on my own. What could that look like? And so
Yeah.
it's taken us some time to kind of get here to say, you know what? How do you define it? What does this mean to you? Who have you thought about? You know what? I go for coffee 3 times a week and I have a really great relationship with Julie down the street at the coffee shop. She's so great at listening. I wonder if I invited her for a walk and we ended up chatting about something different. It could be anyone in your life.
That's so true. And sort of where you find like that natural or the community that doesn't take effort to form or hold together.
Yes, I love that you were trying that the natural was, it's kind of natural.
It
Like
comes out and
start
then you're like, but
using it.
I can't like define it by its own word.
Yes.
Yeah, I get you completely. And building on that natural supports piece, I know prevention is also a key theme of your work. So,
Yes.
how do natural supports function as preventative or protective factors for things like mental health, well-being?
Yeah. And I thank you for putting prevention and protective factors in the same space. So, not sometimes we use language that people don't use on a regular basis, like protective factors. And when we think of protective factors is defined as things that can help you when you're not doing well, as the simplest form of what a protective factor is. Natural supports are those, right? And so for me, I made a joke, about a year ago, when I was still with government to the Ministry of Health, and I had just said, "You're going to be writing me a thank you card in 5 years because this is going to take off." Because really is what we were seeing at the community level and these stats soaring with suicide attempts, with opioid and addictions issues, poverty, and mental health issues, mental health and mental illness around anxiety and depression and spaces have been consistently on the rise where we are almost in crisis territory. And I would say we are in crisis territory. I add almost for some of the viewers out there who don't feel that way. Um, and then you sit with it. I know when people around me are not doing well. And so instead of me just saying, "Hey, Sarah, how are you?" And you say, "I'm fine." And I say, "Cool, let's head out." And I just say, "Hey, you don't seem like yourself right now. I'm really worried about you. Can we chat?"
Yeah.
And then just opening those things. I think that could be a really powerful preventative tool. If nobody ever asked you how you really were doing or asked you an open-ended, in-depth question, and then you carry that burden that tends to get bigger and bigger and bigger when we don't share. When we keep that up and we keep it in, our heads and our minds, our brains are sometimes the most awful to us.
Yeah.
That negative self-talk, that kind of little imposter in our brain. And I just think that as a preventative measure, I think that if we had more honest, natural, supportive conversations with people that we already choose and love, who don't judge us, who accept us, and we had more tools for those people to feel good or comfortable, not scared in those conversations, we could prevent something from being in that primary prevention stage before it has to be, a critical or a crisis stage. And we as everyday people can do that to support one another.
Absolutely. And that raises for me like that idea of meeting people where they're at, not where we think they should be, not where we assume they are, but meeting them exactly where they are.
Yes. And being able to do that in a good way. I've had conversations with teachers as an example. The kid who walks in chewing gum with a hat on, and then he comes to you to go ask you a question, and we're like, "Hey, you're not allowed to chew gum. Get your hat off. Get out of here." And you're like, "Is the hat really that important? Is the hoodie up really that important?" Like, look back at that connection, look back at relationship building, look back at seeing people for where they are. And now that we're talking about inclusive spaces and wanting people to be able to come in and do that, I can think that this space is inclusive that doesn't matter. The person who's entering that space has to feel like it's inclusive. And so, how do we meet people where they're at? So, it's brought up a lot of things that I think some of us older generations were taught as a respect thing, as a, these are things that we do to accept people for who they are, where they're at, and just be. A natural support is not someone who has to have all the answers. It's kindness, it's a smile. It's making sure people know that you're approachable and that you can, hey, Bran, I'm not doing well. That sounds hard. Like what have you been going through? Do you have time? Let's chat. And just, kicking off conversations in good ways.
Absolutely. And not to go off track at all, but it reminds me of, I teach at the university, and if I say, come to my office if you're having problems, nobody comes because they're like, well, I don't want to have that conversation. But I've started to have snacks in my office and a little Keurig, and I have to-go cups. Not necessarily environmentally friendly, but they can't
Yeah.
exactly walk away with one of my mugs either.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, if you're ever in the building, swing by, have a coffee, chat with me about whatever. Or if you just want a coffee, you don't want to pay for it, come by, grab a snack, and then you can head out. And in those couple minutes where they come by my office to get a coffee, they tell me so much more about how they're doing and what they need than they would if they came down. They're like, I have a problem with this. It's,
We thank you for sharing that. One, I love Capilano's campus. I went to university in BC.
did you?
My daughter just played volleyball for the College of the Rockies, and so we got to travel and support her in those spaces. I think that's amazing because is what we try to do is we try to create these structured spaces professionally. Same with my coworkers. I would do the same thing. You end up having the mental health hat. And it's funny because I'm like all the time, people are like, Brandy, you're not a therapist or a counselor. I don't pretend to be.
Mhm.
I'm not a social worker by any means, but having hard conversations and starting with kindness and making sure people that I love and care about and my community are okay, it is okay. And I've taken that on to now it's also my responsibility. And so, Sarah, you found some really great ways of getting people to stop in. And we're seeing it in schools more. We're seeing it all over the place where you have to start with a connection and a relationship. And so if I grab a granola bar because I'm a broke student, and yes, a free coffee because I haven't been paid yet, and I can, stop by your office and then you go, "Hey, Brandy, are you okay? You seemed really great at the beginning of the week and I know it's Thursday and we're leaning into the weekend. Are you doing okay?" Oh, it's so stressful. And people start sharing. And
Mhm.
then they know that your door is open and you can stop and you can have that conversation. Sometimes that conversation doesn't come out in that first space, right? It's about building comfortability. It's about that connection. And it's about just being able to see each other as people. And I think with how busy life has gotten, we've kind of got away from that. I talk about it with coworkers or even our youth that they would rather text than phone, right?
Yeah.
Even some of our helpful things, the kids helpline, the crisis line, a lot of those have gone to texting because that's how people want to interact, right?
Oh,
And so
definitely.
this kind of human connectedness we've gotten away from in some of those spaces where it doesn't feel as comfortable as maybe it used to.
Yeah, that's so well put. And I also want to come back to the point you talked about, like, at least many of us feeling like the world's in crisis. And I would absolutely agree, given the state of affairs of everything, even though some people may not agree with that. But that brings up for me sort of like, in your experience, what makes a support system strong or effective, especially in times like this of starting with stress or moving to what we would consider crisis?
So a lot of times, talking to youth, talking to coworkers, a lot of the kind of community grassroots feedback survey, a lot of the pieces, um, when we talk about a good support network, a lot of times people think that means lots of people. I gotta have like I need all kinds of people in my corner. And I think if you have all kinds of people in your corner, that's amazing. If you feel comfortable to kind of bare your soul, to you have people in your life who don't judge you, who meet you where you're at, whatever that looks like, with empathy, who empower you to make decisions for yourself. Like, I love that, and I would be your biggest, greatest cheerleader. I think that's amazing. But support systems don't have to be large and vast. You don't have to have 25 people. I think that you have to have a few good people that you know that you can rely on and depend on, because people are busy. And so if I, reached out to my best bud she is a mom of three kids in Vancouver, running her own business, doing all the things. And so it's not always easy, right? And it's funny, Simon Sinek just did a podcast and just did something on this space of, do you have 8 minutes? He changed the way he spoke to a friend. One of
Mhm.
his friends kept reaching out, "Hey, are you busy? Can you grab coffee?" And he said, "No, sorry, crazy week." And then she reached out again and said, "Hey, come over for supper tonight." And he's like, "Oh, sorry, dinner plans, have a big client meeting." And they finally get together. And she goes, "Oh, I'm really struggling." And he's like, "Why?" He was mad. He was upset.
Yeah.
Like, "Why didn't you reach out to me?" She's like, "I did." No, you didn't. You said he picks up his phone and he goes, "You said let's have coffee and let's have dinner. How am I supposed to know something's wrong or you need me?" And
Yeah.
so they developed a thing where, do you have 8 minutes? And I just found that so powerful, because that's kind of sometimes what we do as people.
Yeah.
Like, "Hey, Sarah, do you have time for a coffee?" And you're like, "Oh, midterms. Ah,
Yeah.
no, I'm marking and I'm, extra credit and I'm doing all of these things.
Yeah.
You might push me off for a coffee, but I said, "Sarah, I really need you." When we don't put ourselves out there like that very often. And so I found, what Simon and his friend were talking about, just how awesome is that? Is that one piece. The other piece that has really come up in this natural supports work is just getting it out. So people have said, like, "Can my dog be a natural support? Is it helpful for you?" If you have a really great relationship and you talk to your dog and that works for you, who am I to say no? Right? That might not work for me because I might need a little bit of feedback. But if that works for someone else, or their cat, or journaling, and then, writing a letter to somebody that they're struggling with, and then, ripping it up, or doing, like, all of those things can be really supportive. For me, it's always been about, what can I do on my own first, for me? And I think it's just kind of a natural thing. We've come to this very busy time where we don't want to burden everybody with all of our stuff. And I can't call my best friend 7 times a week to try to deal, right? So
That's
it's
true.
it's what does that look like? And so how can I help myself too? I think we really have to spend some time with ourselves to be like, what do I need? And just I'll give you a quick example. I had met with some youth who talked about music being really important to their mindset and to how they wake up and feel. So then I asked them, one of these a 16-year-old young woman was going through a breakup of somebody who was really important to her, and she felt like she lost kind of, her partner and her best friend all in the same swoop, and just gone instantly, no contact, cut out of their life. And I said, "Hey, you told me music really helps you." She's like, "Yeah, it's not working." And I said, "What are you listening to?" Listening to a Spotify playlist of all of the saddest love songs is not going
That's
to help. Right? And so
mhm.
we started asking just more specific questions. When I want to feel good, I can't listen to the saddest love songs. I need to listen to things that are going to make me feel good, make me jump or dance, or, move my body, put a smile on your face, and how we're in control of that. So I think support, we have to stop looking at it so narrowly. We can support ourselves. And then when that's not working and when we're struggling and that voice in our head is getting loud or getting mean, then it's just the people that you love and trust. And for people out there who may be listening who feel like, you know what, I don't have anybody I love and trust. As a former crisis responder for the crisis text line and the kids help phone, there are compassionate, empathetic, kind people who volunteer their time across our country to help anybody at 2 a.m., 6 a.m., 2 p.m. You know, there are people there. And sometimes strangers um, are easier to talk to.
That's very true. Very true. And something you said just a couple minutes ago about the do you have 8 minutes? That
Yeah.
really resonated with me because oftentimes I'm that person who's like, I love you, I care for you as a friend, I'm so busy. But it sort of raises for me the idea that a lot of people don't realize the impact they can or do have on the people around them. And so thinking about things like that 8 minutes, how
Yeah.
can individuals build or strengthen natural supports in their own communities, even in the smallest of ways?
That's such a great question, Sarah. And honestly, like practice, right? We sometimes and like the Simon Sinek example, sometimes we don't know, right? Because people are reaching out. If you have somebody who's reaching out in your life multiple times who normally doesn't, like just ask yourself why. There's probably something more and they haven't wanted to say. Um, I've used the 8 minute thing. I was going to send Simon Sinek a thank you note actually and say like this is incredible because it changes how we then talk about what we need. Because a lot of times we don't actually ask for what we need. We don't want to interrupt, interfere, or burden. So we just say, "Hey, do you have 5?" Or, "Hey, can you go for coffee or let's go for dinner?" And I have said no so many times, not realizing that somebody has needed something because of schedules or commitments or what that looks like. And so I think slowing down when it comes to the people that we love
Yeah,
and,
so
and just
true.
recognizing we know when people are not doing well. We know when things are going great. And like us and normally helpers are the last group of people to ask for help because they already know how strained systems are and kind of what that looks like. And so, it's funny because sometimes people say, and COVID showed us this, right? We
That's very true.
rarely really checked in on people who looked like they had it all together, right? And so it's checking in on everyone, no matter if they have it together, because those amazing check-ins to talk about mental health can be when things are going great,
Mhm.
that hopeful, that belonging piece, that it's really just about being able to stay connected. So I think when we start to avoid some of those conversations because they're uncomfortable or we're afraid of saying the wrong thing or adults have told us like, fear, liability, responsibility. Oh, Brandy's really struggling. I don't know what to say to her. It's just, I sometimes tell like Winnie the Pooh it. You don't have to say anything. Just sit on the log and say, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
What do you need? It's funny. I used that Winnie the Pooh example with a group of kids at a high school, and a young guy stuck his hand up and said, "Winnie the huh?" And I was like,
Oh no.
how do we reintroduce Winnie the Pooh to this
Right?
generation? I don't know what's happening.
I thought Winnie the
That
Pooh was timeless.
I did too. And so just those spaces. So sometimes you just have to sit in the mud, and it's
Yep.
okay to be uncomfortable, and it's okay to be afraid, and to just say, "Hey, this conversation is really scary. I see that you're not doing well. How are you coping? What's your next step? How are you doing?" And really be a sounding board instead of that fixer, advice giver, right? Kindness and empathy, meet them where they're at, and then just dig in to let them share the hard things that they're trying to deal with in the chaos of their own brain.
Absolutely. And I think that resonates a lot with kind of the undercurrents of a lot of your work being things like communications and relationships. And keeping those things in mind, what role do you think communication plays in creating meaningful, supportive connections?
So much, right? Because one, how we communicate with each other. When someone's texting me, I can't see their body language. I don't necessarily know if they're in a safe spot or a safe place. I now ask those questions that I wouldn't ask if I was sitting in a room with you. Um, we also tend to try to be subtle or beat around the bush when it comes to hard things. I've stopped.
Okay.
In some of those spaces, if somebody is talking, quite dark and going, "Ugh, like I give up. I have tried everything. Nothing is working. Nobody appreciates me. I am stuck here. I don't want to be here. I think this place would be better off without me." They are telling me whether it's, smack in the face or if somebody would call that subtly, that they are thinking about not being here. I have asked, "Are you thinking about suicide?" over 3,000 times in my practice of conversations with people.
That's a lot.
Less than 2% of people have been angry about that question. A lot of times it's, "Oh my God, like how did you know?" Or, Yes, can we talk about that?" Yes, we can. Like that's on the table. Is it hard and uncomfortable and scary? 100%. And the people who have gotten mad or have been frustrated, "No, Brandy, you're totally missing the point." And I've been like, "Okay, dude, paint me a picture. What's on the table here? What are we talking about?" And if somebody said, "No, I'm not thinking about that at all," thank you for sharing that with me because at least now I know that we're not there. But
Yeah.
it's still hard and you're still struggling and it's still stressful. And what does that look like? And even in, teaching assist or different safe talk and different suicide prevention, trainings and facilitating options, just that sentence is so hard for people. And I don't think you have to ask it every single time, but trust your gut when you're seeing your people, your friends, your family, the people you support when things might not be going well. Because suicidal thoughts don't always equal death, right? They equal "I'm stuck and I don't want to be in this situation right now." And if somebody continues to struggle and doesn't reach out for help, that can turn into crisis. So is what we're really trying to do is continue to have those good conversations before it gets to a crisis place.
That is so very well put. And also like I think it raises for a lot of us that it is okay to ask those tough questions or to be there for someone because feeling uncomfortable asking those or being there for someone when it's that heavy, I think creates a really big barrier between you and the person you're trying to connect with.
100%. And by no means is it, I don't find it ever easy, but I think that if you can cover that up in that kind of care and empathy and just say, "Listen, anything that we talk about, you can talk about anything with me, but I'm noticing that you're really not doing well. And I care and love you. I need to ask this because it's important I understand what we're talking about. Are
Yeah.
you thinking about suicide?" And here's the thing, we lie to ourselves, we lie to our friends, we lie to our people. But if we start creating space where people know that you can talk about absolutely anything with me, then it might not happen that first time, but
Yeah.
maybe it's the second time. "No, I'm not there yet. It's just so stressful." But maybe it is. And you
Yeah.
gotta, kind of work down that line. And I know as I'm talking, this sounds like, "Oh my God, Brandy, this is so much work." What are you asking? You're asking regular people to like step up and have a part-time job. And I'm not. I promise you. I'm asking you to take a look at conversations you're already having with people you love. And when you're afraid to take it that one step further, fight that fear, be uncomfortable, and really ask how they're doing. because I think that there's so many opportunities for prevention that we bypass out of fear.
So true. And also, for me, that makes me think about like what we're calling the loneliness epidemic or something like that for the folks who don't have those connections. And I know that people, even, for example, refer to Vancouver as a very icy city in terms of how people relate to each other, the difficulty forming friendships and relationships. And I imagine it's different for all different types of communities. And so for me, what I'm thinking is like in some communities, there may be barriers to connection, so isolation, limited resources, the subcultures within the place you are.
You
And
bet.
so, how can we navigate or overcome some of these challenges and start to build stronger networks of support?
The easiest way possible. Put yourself out there. Period. And really, it's because we don't anymore. And I don't know if it was COVID, like for some people, and that's easier said than done. I appreciate that, especially if there's any introverts out there or people who don't fill their cup with other people. A lot of times that's where people's cups drain is with other people. But what are your hobbies? Where do you go? Where are your favorite things? Because I promise you, wherever your favorite things are people who think similarly in those same spaces, whether that's chess, art, volleyball, academics, movies, whatever that looks like. You don't have to have 100 supports, right? It's really having two or three spaces in those places. And for me, I think kindness and a smile get you almost in anywhere, everywhere. My husband, hates traveling with me. And he is an introvert. He's a big guy. He's a very quiet guy. And I am not. And I will talk to everybody and say, "Good morning. Oh, I love your shirt. That's great." But I've started to do those things way more than I did because it is about kind of creating those spaces. Joining things you care about in your community. Like, is there a community cleanup? On your block, do you ever have a block party? It's funny. I often go to my grandmother and talk to her about these things because I feel like as a history major, history is cyclical. And we need to start looking at how those relationships were built for neighbors. Sarah, when was the last time you went to your neighbor and borrowed a cup of sugar?
I was a kid.
Right? Like things that, do we even know who our neighbors are anymore? Do you know who your neighbors are? Why don't we? Yeah, I moved onto my block in this small community, and a doctor lived there before me, and he's from South Africa. And every time somebody moved in, he brought them a little basket of salad dressing and things from South Africa to welcome people to the community.
How lovely.
We don't do the small gestures anymore. Have a
Right?
barbecue, knock on doors and have a yard sale. Um, like, especially around, college and university, and there's so many places to interact or have an opportunity to connect. Take advantage, even if you just go and don't say a word, right? That first time, you'll find people, poetry readings, coffee shops, concerts. Like, go and immerse yourself where people are. And I think that, and I know that doesn't sound awesome for everyone, but volunteer, volunteer, um, shelters, food banks, crisis lines, all of those places where sometimes, if I didn't have a support, I created one.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
I think that's also, it's something that you said earlier in the webinar that you did too around like either do it and if you're scared, then do it scared. And I think that's such a powerful way to think about it because when we feel safe, we're comfortable and there's no growth and no change where we're comfortable.
Yeah. And it's funny. I have these failure conversations with youth. I coach volleyball at our local high school and have for almost 2 decades. Um, and I see now in these last 2 years something different coming out of young women that I hadn't seen before. And that was just so much anxiety and stress in not wanting to make a mistake. To like, I stopped practice and put on a pro YouTube game going, have you watched pro sport? There's mistakes all over the place. Somebody is
Yeah.
going to score. That's just the way it works. That can be a great, a great play, and we lose a point or not get that point. But I've seen it now kind of manifest in not wanting to try because I have to be good at it or I can't fail at it. And so even using the word fail, and I'm not somebody who thinks we have to start, avoiding words in those spaces, but let's really wrap what failure is. Like that is where we as human beings have done the most learning. I have failed so much in my life. When I'm winning, when I have been the most successful, you kind of ride that out. When I have failed, that's when I've realized that was a wrong turn. I didn't prepare as much as I should have. What does that look like? And so, again, it is really, and I shared with you in the webinar, this has been my journey of as I've started my new business. It's the first time I've really said, like, Brandi, what do you need? And what does that look like? And I think it is about giving ourselves grace and room to fail and grow. And that is messy. That is never going to be clean cut. And that's okay. And so if I think about everything that I would not have accomplished if I didn't try because I was scared, I wouldn't be here with you today.
That is so well put. And throughout our conversation, you've given, I think, so many big messages or takeaways for those who are listening. But if you had one final one you wanted to give, a message or takeaway that you hope listeners carry with them about natural supports being those human or more than human, like
Yeah.
nature, like
Yes.
animals, and or the power of connection or community, what would that big takeaway be?
Oh,
I saved the hardest question of them all for last.
you did. Uh, One takeaway. I'm going to give you two.
That's
Sorry.
good. Two words.
Um, oh, I guess if there's any takeaway that from the webinar to here that I would really want people to know and have is that you have the power to make a difference. Whoever you are listening right now, you matter. You are important and you have the power to affect someone else's life and outcome. And sometimes we think that I can't help a friend or I can't have this conversation because it's too big, it's too hard. I'm not a professional. Our professionals are strapped. They are bending as far as they can to not be broken. Our systems are so overwhelmed. What is our next step? Honestly, I feel like it's just one step backwards. And that's why natural supports is this prevention space, is the power is you. The power is you, is to have these conversations before they become crisis and critical. Because there are people out there who are in crisis and who are critical and who need our systems. And we have people who might not be there that feel like they don't have a support or don't know how to have those questions. So the power is in you. You are important. You make a difference to someone. I promise you, you make a difference every day in someone else's life, and you might not know it. And the second piece is something that I chatted a little bit with you, Sarah, at the end of that webinar, is really critically look at how we safety plan in society right now. Because I'm telling you, every system that I have looked at, from social services to healthcare to nonprofit, we only plan for our safety in crisis. We need to flip that on its head. How do we plan for our own wellness and safety when we're feeling good about ourselves? Brandi, what are your strengths? How can you get yourself out of a bad situation? You've been here before. Who are the people that you can call? Imagine putting that into employee handbooks and dealing with employers or orientations, schools. Colleges and universities, what can we do? Social services, student services, places where people connect and depend on each other for a short period or a long period of time. How can we protect each other in good ways? But maybe that should have been the first one because really the power is in you.
But both of those are so powerful, and I think you say there are two, but I think they work so well in tandem that they could even just be one.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well, Brandi, just again, I want to reiterate from myself from AVA, thank you so much. It's been so insightful to spend both the webinar and the podcast with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and also just to be able to share some information about how important good conversations can be every day. So thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on the HERHealth podcast, transforming health for women and girls at risk. Remember, your health matters, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, remember to prioritize your health and well-being. For more resources and support on issues affecting girls, women, and gender-diverse people, visit our website at avatraining.ca. This is Dr. Nicole Letourneau. Thank you for listening.